What's up, hoops heads and nephews out there? This is going to be part two, a continuation of my last video of NBA trade ideas. I thought I was going to make it all one video. It was getting a little bit longer than I expected, so I decided to cut it down into two videos. The last video should already be up on the channel by the time you're watching this one. Be sure you check that one out as well if you haven't already. Just a little bit of a reminder, all these trades were made by me. They were created by me, and they're all made just for fun. If your favorite team or players in this video, don't get upset about anything that I say or the fact that I believe they should be traded. This is all just for fun, no reason to be offended. All these trades pass both financially and stipend rules. All of them can be done, like whenever. I mean, they can't be done until December 15th. Some of them due to recently signed trading rules, but other than that, any other trade could be done today. And then lastly, understand that all value is subjective and it's impossible to exactly know what the perfect assets coming back in exchange for a player would be. Same thing with draft picks. No one exactly has the same value on picks as everyone else. Um, Second round picks can be worth more to some teams than others. So sometimes the picks in some of these trades may be a little bit off. You may need to add one, subtract one, stuff like that. But look more so at the player side of things for these trades. But without further ado, let's get right rolling into part two. I hope you guys enjoy it. Leave a comment below the trades you like, the trades you didn't like, the things you would change about said trades. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, share it with your friends, and I appreciate all the love and support, guys. Let's get into it. So this first trade sees the Chicago Bulls get Evan Fournier, Gary Trent Jr., Grady Dick, Quentin Grimes, a 2024 first-round pick via the Knicks, a 2024 first-round pick via the Knicks or from the Knicks via Dallas, and a 2026 second-round pick from Toronto. Toronto Raptors get Zach LaVine, Torrey Craig, and a 2024 second-round pick, and the Knicks get OG Anunoby. So in this situation, this is the Knicks deciding they are going to hold on to Siakam, decide to go all in and look to still extend their timeline with Siakam, Barnes, and now Zach LaVine, who they bring in here alongside Torrey Craig and a second round pick. One of the biggest issues with the Raptors the past couple of years is while they have had good players on their rosters like the Barnes, like Siakam, like previously last year, Fred VanVleet. They've never really had that score that can take over the game. Give you 30 any given night. Siakam has the ability to score. However, sometimes bigs do have those nights where they just don't have that ability to get the same amount of points off that a scorer like a Zach LaVine could. And I think this would very elevate their ceiling here. However, you do see them lose a lot of pieces on the outside, losing OG Anunoby as well as Gary Trent Jr. Those will be a little bit hard to replace. Um, but some of that stuff is necessary to free up the cap to bring in Zach LaVine, and they are bringing in another piece like Torrey Craig as a 3 and D wing guy who can get some rotational minutes there. But ultimately, it's the scoring of Zach LaVine that elevates the Raptors into a contender once again, pairing him alongside Barnes and Siakam. Meanwhile, like I said, they had to get rid of OG to free up space, and he ends up going to the Knicks. The Knicks are facilitating this deal. As a result, they are getting off Fournier's contract. But OG Anunoby is a guy that likes to play hard-nosed defense, aggressive defense. He can score the ball as well, as though he isn't going to be a 30-point type of guy. And I don't expect to see him take a explosion in scoring the same way Mikal Bridges did upon being traded. But I do think that he will fit right in with this Knicks squad pretty easily. It wouldn't be shocking to see a lineup of, like a Brunson, RJ Barrett, OG, Randall, Mitchell Robinson when he's back from injury. That's just breaking kind of within the past 5 minutes that Mitchell Robinson is going to be out 8 to 10 weeks, which could mess with some of these trades. But for now, we'll leave it as this: as they get a lot better defensively. He's a step up from both, or from Quentin Grimes defensively, and they are getting off that Fournier contract as well. So then from the Bulls side of things, you're bringing in the two main big pieces you're getting from this are Grady Dick and Quentin Grimes, two younger scoring guards that have potential to take the next step over the next year or two, especially scoring the basketball. Quentin Grimes has already been a pretty consistent shooter as a starter for the Knicks, and Grady Dick, just drafted this year, has a high ceiling that we saw at Kansas. They are going to eat that Fournier contract. They do also get Gary Gary Trent Jr. in here. I'm not sure what they decide they'd want to do with him. They may move him on or just keep him for the next 1 or 2 years, depending Lonzo's health, and if Caruso, gets moved and whatnot. They may need some more guard rotation there. And then they are getting two first round picks in from the Knicks to help facilitate this deal. To get off the Fournier contract, they're getting a huge needed upgrade. You look at Fournier; he's not really playing for the Bull or for the Knicks. He's not really adding any value. So for them to replace him with a guy like OJ Anunoby, it's going to be part of the reason that they have to send some of these picks out there as well. And then the Bulls are also going to get another second. But this one would be very interesting to see. I don't expect the Raptors to go all in, but I do think it would be a fun little twist on kind of what we're expecting to see. All the values work out here, and I think all three teams would be better set for the future if this trade did go down. All right, for this next trade, we see the Brooklyn Nets receive Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, and Kelly Olynyk in exchange for Ben Simmons, Royce O'Neal, Derek Whitehead, a 2025 first-round pick via the Phoenix Suns, a 2026 second-round pick, a 2027 first-round pick via the Phoenix Suns, and a 2028 first-round pick from the Nets. So last season, we saw the Nets see instant gratification when they traded away KD to Phoenix, in which saw Mikal Bridges instantly blossom into a star, as well as Cam Johnson taking another step up into his progression. Also, so far this season, we've seen the Nets have some pretty good scoring nights led by Cam Thomas. They decide instead of bulking away from some of the pieces they brought in, they used the rest of the assets they received to go make a big splash here in the trade market and bringing in Colin Sexton, Markkanen, and Kelly Olynyk. Sexton's a little bit more of a reliable defensive guard than Cam Thomas, and he could fit well next to Bridges and Johnson in terms of what they can provide defensively for the Nets. And then with Laurie, you have a little bit more of a finished scorer than what you see with like Bridges and Cam Johnson. He can get it at all three levels and can get 25 points per game or so if need be. And I think he could just really slide in either at that four spot, maybe make Cam Johnson the six man. If you want to play big, you can do that. This trade really allows you a lot of position versatility. I know when your guard rotation can be Cam Thomas, it can be Spencer Dinwiddie, or it can be Colin Sexton. And then when you look at some of your wing depth, you have Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Lauri Markkanen, Dory Finney-Smith. Center wise, you now have Kelly Olynyk to pair alongside Nicholas Claxton. Olynyk adds a lot more shooting than what Claxton does to space the floor. If you want to go five out, uh, there's just a lot of versatility that I think this trade allows them to possess. And on the Jazz side of things, they're getting two first round picks from the Suns in 25 and 27. You never really know what's going to happen with those two picks. I think that Utah's more than willing to take a chance on that. You never know how KD is going to continue to progress through the league as he gets older. You don't know if the Beal and Booker backcourt's going to end up working. I expect Booker to probably still be there around 2027, but you never know with Beal and KD. These picks could have some value by then. Uh, Same you're getting a 2028 first round pick as well. That's three picks going into the war chest that the Jazz already have loaded up. And then, Ben Simmons is a guy that might be interesting for Utah. He hasn't really ever figured it out ever since the playoff incident in Philadelphia, but a lot of that has kind of been distractions and injuries. If he's ever going to figure it out, get back to the game of basketball, it's probably going to be done in Utah. Brooklyn's a lot more of a distraction city than what Salt Lake City is going to be. And even if he doesn't exactly figure out and get back to the old Ben Simmons that you guys knew, uh, even if you put him at a power forward to play next to Walker Kessler in a defensive scheme, it's going to work for a little bit, but the offensive side still needs to come along. Dariq Whitehead's a young 19-year-old prospect, came from Duke, could score the ball. Kind of reminds me of Ochai Agbaji a little bit. It fits in with him as well as Keontae George. Uh, Royce O'Neal is probably not going to be a long-term acquisition piece for them as well. But this is a trade that like I mentioned in my beginning, where you could see, more draft picks need to be added on. I could definitely see that they have to take on more picks here. Um, you know, they are getting three really quality players here. They may have to throw in a fourth first round pick, maybe another role player, perhaps. But I think this is roughly like a deal you could see the next pursue to go all in this year. This isn't one of the most exciting trades I'll have in this video, but I think it makes a lot of sense. if the Nets kind of want to take I mean, it's not even necessarily a step back, but in this trade we have the Nets receiving Peyton Watson and a 2024 second round pick in exchange for Lonnie Walker to the Nuggets. Um, Denver's in fine shape this season. They're not really going to struggle. They look to be in perfect shape to repeat being NBA champs. However, they are in the bottom third of the league when it comes to free throws as well as steals. And I just think Lonnie Walker is a guy they could add to their bench pretty cheaply that could help with both of those. He's on a 1 year deal with the Nets here. He's kind of jumped around the past couple years, spent a little bit of time in the Lakers as well. After originally starting with the Spurs, he's a guy that knows how to draw some contact to get to the line. He can shoot, he can score, get you some steals. He's not gonna be the instant game changer coming in, dropping 30 and a triple double or anything like that. But he's a guy that's gonna fit very well on the bench, can make a spot start for a guy like a KCP or a Michael Porter Jr. needing rest or an injury. Uh, you're giving up Watson, a young 6'8" guard. Maybe that size intrigues the Nets. They already have a lot of versatile size. This seems to fit right in what kind of their scheme is of big guys that like to be able to switch on defense. And then they also get a second that they can use in another trade or potentially just pick a player later on. I don't think the Nets would be too upset. They're not contending for a championship with that current roster. This trade's not going to set them back to being like an awful team either. I think it's worth it for both sides. Another low-key, uneventful one that we got here is the Pelicans receiving Doug McDermott in exchange for Larry Nance and Kier Lewis. Um, Doug McDermott's just kind of a guy that's built in the Kyle Korver, JJ Redick type role as being a catch and shoot shooter. You get him in the corner, you get him on the elbow. Obviously, he's got a bit more size to him than what those guards did, which also is a little bit of an asset around him. But you look at New Orleans; they're not shooting enough threes, they're not making enough threes. Um, that's not a huge surprise when you look at their roster. Obviously, Zion's not a huge threat from three, neither is Valanciunas. Um, then outside of guys like Ingram and McCollum, they don't have a ton of other guys known for their shooting. So I think getting in a rotational piece like McDermott, like I said, currently shooting 46% from three, can spot up anywhere on the floor. I think is a good fit for them to bring in here. Work with his size as well. Him and Ingram are both pretty lengthy guys that you could have out there if you want to go small ball with Zion at the five to really space the floor. And then on the flip side here for the Spurs, McDermott's on a 1 year deal, I believe. Not really a piece to build around like the Wembys are for that squad, the same way that you have like a Sochan or a Malachi Branham. He's not in the long term plans, so you can move on for him and gain a young, high ceiling point guard in Kira Lewis, see what Pop can do to develop him there. I don't think any picks will probably be needed for this one, as Kira Lewis is enough of an asset to work around with this to be even out there. And then they also bring in Larry Nance to make the salaries work. Uh, Ultimately, this just I think raises this Pelicans offensive floor a little bit more as they desperately need that 3-point shooting out there. Enough with the role players. Let's get back to a big one here. We have the Detroit Pistons receiving Kyle Lowry, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, Haywood Highsmith, a 2024 first round pick from Miami, and a 2026 second round pick from Golden State. The Golden State Warriors received Bojan Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, and Caleb Martin, while the Miami Heat received Chris Paul and Monte Morris. We'll start at this from the Golden State Warriors side of things. They're obviously moving on from two of their younger pieces that never quite blossomed the way they hoped, with Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. And while those guys wouldn't be considered busts, they are just guys that potentially need a little bit more minutes to help their development. And they'll probably find that going over to the Pistons, specifically Kuminga, will have a lot better of a fit over there. Moody might have to fight a little bit more with some of their guard rotation, but they also get a pick in for Miami this year. Not a bad return from the Pistons, but the Warriors, back to what I was saying with them. Bojan Bogdanovic is a guy that can fit in at the three or the four. He's a great shooter. I think he fits in a lot with what Golden State wants to do offensively in terms of how they run around the floor, how they space up for threes. He almost reminds me a little bit of a poor man's David Lee. or I guess you could argue he's a better man's David Lee as he's a little bit more talented. But I think he could fit in very similar to the way David Lee did with the Warriors back when they first started their dynasty. And then, you bring in Caleb Martin, a guy that's a very switchable defender. I think he and Gary Payton could have some good shifts together out on the floor as a grinder unit. And then Alec Burks is a guy, veteran. He can be a ball handler if need be, but he's a primary number two. Pretty solid 3-point shooter, takes care of the ball, plays good defense. In this trade, obviously, they're getting rid of Chris Paul as well, so they're going to need a backup point guard, which you could see Burks kind of transition to at certain times for them. But this is a trade that's a lot more about scheme and fit right now for the Warriors. It doesn't seem like Chris Paul is exactly working out for them, and they're really struggling to find guys that are providing some additional scoring outside of Steph. He's kind of been the one carrying them so far. So this just kind of adds some balance throughout. I think Bojan Bogdanovic is a guy that can split some good minutes with Wiggins and Clay out there. Wouldn't be shocked to see him average 15, 16 a game for the Warriors. I think he and Draymond also are going to be able to do some good things out there. From the Miami Heat side of things, as we've kind of talked about before, they're looking to improve their point guard spot and also at the same time, hopefully get off the contract of Kyle Lowry. They're able to do that here, bringing in Chris Paul and Monte Morris. In one of my last videos, I had Chris Paul heading over to Miami, and I kind of discussed about his injury concerns that may hurt the Heat. So in this situation, they're also getting a very solid backup point guard in Monte Morris. He's a guy you trust in spot starts, but he's going to get good minutes for you. uh, I just think this is a great way for the Heat to really secure that point guard positioning with two very smart guys, guys that seem that they'd want to be in Miami, especially Chris Paul. I think he really fits the Heat culture idea of taking basketball very seriously, and ultimately, they are getting rid of a first round pick. That's partially to get the Pistons to take that Lowry contract on, as they don't really have a huge need to do that. Uh, but they're also getting Morris back from the Pistons there. They sent Haywood Highsmith over. I just think he's a good rotational guy that can fit into a lot of teams' schemes and fits there, and I just think that makes a lot of sense. And then, like I said, the Pistons, they're going to have to eat that Lowry contract. No guarantee he plays. He could potentially be a buyout candidate somewhere else because they have a plethora of guards there. Kaminga and Moody, definitely guys that are going to fit into that long-term fit with the Pistons there. Moody could potentially be a small forward, Kaminga the power forward. Um, if you could get a young lineup going of you like a Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Moses Moody, Kaminga, Jalen Duren, depending how those guys develop over the next 2 years, that could be a very young, strong team for multiple years to come. Uh, this would be an interesting trade all around. I think the Warriors may say no, as they don't know if they like the star power coming back, but I don't think they need the star power as much as they need the scheme fit. A little bit earlier, I showed you what a trade could look like if the Raptors decide to go all in, but this is a trade where they decide to sell. In this case, the Hawks get Pascal Siakam and Otto Porter Jr. in exchange for Clint Capella, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Kobe Buffkin, AJ Griffin, a 2024 first round pick via the Sacramento Kings, and a 2024 first round pick from the Hawks lottery protected. Um, when you look at the Hawks, they lost John Collins this offseason, traded him away for Rudy Gay, and never really exactly filled that power forward role there. They're also kind of looking to make that transition from Clint Capella over to Onyeka Okongwu. And I think this trade really can allow that swap to happen here. Um, Clint will go up to Toronto, as will Bogdan Bogdanovic, but you'll see, find some spot or space to slide Siakam in that starting lineup there. I think the Hawks are also a little bit sad, worried that they're underperforming, especially with Trey Young. They don't want to see him ask out. In the NBA, it's very common to see trades for stars. A lot of star players want trades, they ask out, stuff like that. So they got to go all in to try to find the right amount of talent to surround Trey to keep the Hawks competitive and keep him in Atlanta. Um, they tried to do that with DeJounte Murray, didn't exactly work, and I think a guy that's a little bit better off ball should be the fit here. He also adds some backline defensive support next to Onyeka and Kungwu. Uh, he has that size that's probably going to make Kungwu's transition to a full-time starter a little bit easier than if he was playing next to like a Sadiq Bey at the four. Siakam's got a lot more size and has played a lot of center actually for Toronto. He could be the center down here in Atlanta in the right situation. And they also bring in Otto Porter, a guy that plays some pretty solid defense, which is where the Hawks are lacking. On the flip side, when you look at the Raptors side of things, they're bringing in some two young prospects, Kobe Buffkin, AJ Griffin. I could see Buffkin eventually becoming maybe that point guard for them, as I don't think Schroeder's the long-term option there. They have a couple first-round picks coming in. They might want to, deviate those to later years opposed to 2024. And I think AJ Griffin fits really well next to Scotty Barnes. Like I said, they're also bringing in Capella and Bogdanovich in this situation. I could see them potentially just leaving those guys in the lineup and letting them finish out the year. They may flip on Bogdanovich. They may potentially flip on Gary Trent Jr. elsewhere to make that space for Bogdanovich in the starting lineup. Not entirely sure how they'll do that, but Buffkin and Griffin are the main player pieces they're excited for. And then depending what they want from those picks, whether they're this year or in the future, will be interesting. But I think Siakam is kind of what the Hawks may need to do if they want to show Trey that they're still trying to go win a championship with him as the primary option. He can extend the floor, he can extend the floor, add spacing there. He can shoot it, pick and pops, pick and rolls. Um, but like I said, defensively is the spot the Hawks have always struggled, and I think this is a guy that can come in and have good defensive versatility to help that squad out. When you have guys, Sadiq Bey, Jalen Johnson, DeAndre Hunter, those guys are kind of switchable for the most part. If you have like a lineup of maybe, a DeJounte Murray, Otto Porter, uh, you go Siakam out there, maybe the auto. I mean, there's a lot of guys you can have out there that will be switchable versatility wise defensively in certain lineups that I think can make some middle of the game things go easier. Maybe this lineup comes out for 7 minutes in the third quarter to really slow down the other team. Something you could see that could eventually help elevate the Raptors in the or the Hawks this season. Excuse me. A little bit earlier, I showed you what a trade could look like. It might have been in the last video actually, of what the Nets could look like if they decide to go all in using the assets they received when they traded away KD, Kyrie, and Harden. Um, and as a result, this is the flip side of that. There are a lot of teams currently in the league that are kind of in that borderline spot where they don't know if they want to contend or set back. The Nets are kind of in that spot of about a 500 team. This situation, they're going back and they're sending Mikal Bridges and Claxton to the Thunder in exchange for Davis Bertans, Alexef Alexef Pokusevski, Osman Dang, Isaiah Joe, a 2024 first round pick via the Clippers, a 2024 second round pick via the Houston Rockets, a 2025 lottery protected first round pick, a 2025 first round pick via the Philadelphia 76ers, a 2025 second round pick via the Atlanta Hawks, and a 2027 first round pick via the Denver Nuggets. So this is a lot to take in here. Let's look at it from the Thunder side of things. Obviously, we know how many assets and picks they have to go out there and make a big move. It just seems like there's been a little hesitancy thus far on OKC's part in deciding to go all in, or maybe they just haven't quite found the right trade that they want to go all in on. And I think this trade makes a lot of sense. When you look at Mikal Bridges, he's a guy that's a three-way star, an offense and a defensive star. He can guard the other team's best player, but can also get you 20 points a game. And I think that's a great fit for what the Thunder kind of need at the moment. Defense is definitely one of their big priorities going on, but it wouldn't help them to find a number two scorer after SGA. Obviously, he's getting about 30 points a game. He's been one of the best players in the league this year and a potential MVP candidate. But Josh Giddey hasn't had that scoring range that the Thunder thought they'd be getting from him. Chet is still growing into his body, still growing into the league, still figuring it out. And so I just think this really elevates their ceiling now, and especially because these guys will be long-term fits with the Thunder. They fit the right age range, they fit the contract wise. Uh, it just makes a lot of sense, and I haven't even touched on the fact they're bringing in Claxton as well. The biggest issue so far this season for the Thunder has been their ability to rebound. Part of that is just due to, like I said, Chet still working on getting his physicality up in the league. But even then, some of their backups, when you're looking at like a Pokuevsky or something like that, are just kind of smaller guys. So to bring in a guy like Claxton who really owns the glass, especially defensively, great rim protector, one of the best blocking big men in the league. I think this is a great way to really lock down everything top to bottom that the Thunder are hoping for. You really improve your defense. You add another player that can score the ball. You add a guy that can rebound. You can add some rim protection. Um, you're not really losing anything too crazy in terms of rotational pieces. Uh, Isaiah Joe hurts a little bit. He's kind of been a good bench guard, can shoot the three ball, plays a little bit of defense, but they got plenty of guards over there. You know, Trey Mann's a guy that hasn't seen a ton of minutes either. Neither has Cason Wallace, who I know the Thunder look to be high on so far. I think that can open up some spots there. Oshman Dang hasn't really developed quite yet, hasn't seen the minutes as return, but he's a high ceiling guy as well. And then all those picks going over there to the Nets. You know, the Nets already have so many picks going on, and they just add to it. You know, this first round pick via the Clippers could be interesting if that blows up in their face and all those guys don't necessarily work out. That 2025 first from Philly, same thing if Embiid asks out. That 2027 first via Denver's probably pretty safe, but it's one of those things that, you know, maybe the Nuggets win a championship again this year and Jokic is content with basketball and decides to retire. If there's any guy in the league that would do that, it would probably be Jokic. I just think this is a good resetting way to for the Nets. And while their roster does have talent, it doesn't have enough talent to compete. And you know, resetting with all these picks, still having young guys like Cam Thomas, like Ushman Jang, um, I just think there's a chance that this is maybe the way they'd like to go to reset some things. For this trade, we see the Washington Wizards receive Marcus Morris, a 2024 second round pick, and another 2024 second round pick, while the 76ers receive point guard Tyus Jones. Not the most flashy trade for the 76ers here. They're doing better this season than I expected after losing James Harden. When I saw the return of players they got back from the Clippers, I didn't think that would do a lot for them. I don't think many of those guys deserve to be rotational pieces. And I would expect a lot of those guys, since they are on expiring contracts, to either be flipped for pieces to use this year or just let them expire and hope they can use that cap space this summer to sign a free agent. However, I do expect them to probably make a trade at some sorts to try to go improve this season's standings. And I think Tyus Jones would be a pick or a trade that makes decent sense for the 76ers. Obviously, the main player they've been linked to has been Zach LaVine from the Raptors here. However, I don't know how well he would necessarily fit alongside of Maxi, and I think Tyus Jones is probably a better fit. Despite the Sixers not struggling too bad this year, their numbers show that they really struggle on the terms of getting assists and generating offense that way. And when you have a player like Joel MVP Embiid, uh, you need to get a lot more assists in your offense. Maybe set up more pick and rolls, easy buckets for Embiid, where he doesn't have to create the offense as much for himself. And Maxi's one of those guys that, while he has kind of slowly developed into a point guard, oftentimes he can elevate the tempo of the game and think a little too quickly and not be as much as a playmaker as he should be. And Tyus Jones is the ultimate playmaker, the ultimate ball handler, the ultimate ball taker care of. Um, you know, he doesn't turn over the ball. He has one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the history of the NBA. I just think he's a guy that can find the proper way to get Embiid touches and easy touches, especially come in the playoffs. It's a lot harder to score in the playoffs, especially as a big man. So if you can find a perfect guy to set it up for you, I think it makes things easier, and that's what Tyus Jones will do. And I think he can also set up plays for Maxi, whether that be, you know, giving him the opportunity to get some catch and shoot threes up, or even just you know, maybe just being off ball can get him a different switch of some sort before you give him the ball. I just think that I just think that it helps there. And he's also on a 1 year deal, so it doesn't hurt any of their offseason plans in terms of pursuing a superstar free agent, or maybe they just choose to re-sign Tyus Jones as he really helped calm down that offense. Uh, and also, you know, on the flip side here, the Wizards are getting Marcus Morris's expiring contract in 2 seconds. Um, Tyus doesn't really hasn't really indicated he'd like to continue in Washington after this season, and he is a free agent. You might as well get a little bit of value from him while you still can in those 2 second round picks. You get some free cap space up there. Um, I think that's probably a pretty fair trade there for the Wizards. And from the 76ers perspective, you still have the Batum and Covington contracts that you could move on. And you never know what you could find with that. Maybe you get a guy like a Bogdan Bogdanovich, maybe a Gary Trent Jr., just one of those a little bit cheaper option guys that isn't a superstar but can help fill out that rotation as well. I just think this would be a good first step for the Sixers for this season here. Enough with the role players. Let's get back to a big one here. We have the Detroit Pistons receiving Kyle Lowry, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, Haywood Highsmith, a 2024 first round pick from Miami, and a 2026 second round pick from Golden State. The Golden State Warriors received Bojan Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, and Caleb Martin, while the Miami Heat received Chris Paul and Monte Morris. We'll start at this from the Golden State Warriors side of things. They're obviously moving on from two of their younger pieces that never quite blossomed the way they hoped, with Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. And while those guys wouldn't be considered busts, they are just guys that potentially need a little bit more minutes to help their development. And they'll probably find that going over to the Pistons, specifically Kuminga will have a lot better of a fit over there. Moody might have to fight a little bit more with some of their guard rotation, but they also get a pick in for Miami this year. Not a bad return from the Pistons, but the Warriors, back to what I was saying with them. Bojan Bogdanovic is a guy that can fit in at the 3 or the 4. He's a great shooter. I think he fits in a lot with what Golden State wants to do offensively in terms of how they run around the floor, how they space up for threes. Uh, he almost reminds me a little bit of a poor man's David Lee. Or I guess you could argue he's a better man's David Lee as he's a little bit more talented. But I think he could fit in very similar to the way David Lee did with the Warriors back when they first started their dynasty. And then, you bring in Caleb Martin, a guy that's a very switchable defender. I think he and Gary Payton could have some good shifts together out on the floor as a grinder unit. And then Alec Burks is a guy, veteran. He can be a ball handler if need be, but he's a primary number two. Pretty solid 3 point shooter, takes care of the ball, plays good defense. In this trade, obviously, they're getting rid of Chris Paul as well, so they're going to need a backup point guard, which you could see Burks kind of transition to at certain times for them. But this is a trade that's a lot more about scheme and fit right now for the Warriors. It doesn't seem like Chris Paul is exactly working out for them, and they're really struggling to find guys that are providing some additional scoring outside of Steph. He's kind of been the one carrying them so far. So this just kind of adds some balance throughout. I think Bojan Bogdanovic is a guy that can split some good minutes with Wiggins and Clay out there. Wouldn't be shocked to see him average 15, 16 a game for the Warriors. I think he and Draymond also are going to be able to do some good things out there. From the Miami Heat side of things, as we've kind of talked about before, they're looking to improve their point guard spot and also at the same time, hopefully get off the contract of Kyle Lowry. They're able to do that here, bringing in Chris Paul and Monte Morris. In one of my last videos, I had Chris Paul heading over to Miami, and I kind of discussed about his injury concerns that may hurt the Heat. So in this situation, they're also getting a very solid backup point guard in Monte Morris. He's a guy you trust in spot starts, but he's going to get good minutes for you. uh, I just think this is a great way for the Heat to really secure that point guard positioning with two very smart guys, guys that seem that they'd want to be in Miami, especially Chris Paul. I think he really fits the Heat culture idea of taking basketball very seriously, and ultimately, they are getting rid of a first round pick. That's partially to get the Pistons to take that Lowry contract on, as they don't really have a huge need to do that. Uh, but they're also getting Morris back from the Pistons there. They sent Haywood Highsmith over. I just think he's a good rotational guy that can fit into a lot of teams' schemes and fits there. And I just think that makes a lot of sense. And then, like I said, the Pistons, they're going to have to eat that Lowry contract. No guarantee he plays. He could potentially be a buyout candidate somewhere else because they have a plethora of guards there. Kuminga and Moody, definitely guys that are going to fit into that long term fit with the Pistons there. Moody could potentially be a small forward, Kuminga the power forward. Um, if you could get a young lineup going of you like a Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Moses Moody, Kuminga, Jalen Duren, depending how those guys develop over the next 2 years, that could be a very young, strong team for multiple years to come. this would be an interesting trade all around. I think the Warriors may say no, as they don't know if they like the star power coming back, but I don't think they need the star power as much as they need the scheme fit.